This isn't working. All right. Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Can I get a 5x5 in the audience letting me know that you guys can hear me speaking along with the music in the background? Because that's what you're supposed to hear. You're supposed to hear my theme song, and then you're also supposed to hear my voice. So if you can tell me that you can hear me, I sure do appreciate it. We've got patriots from all across the globe here right now. Kentucky, I saw Pennsylvania, boom shakalaka boom. I see lots of good people in the audience tonight, guys. Thank you so much. If you could be so kind as to like and share the broadcast, also put it on your social media platform, your favorite social media platform. Michael Kenny already gave a super chat. He said 25, but he posted $2. I don't know what that means, Michael, if you're trying to tell me something else, brother. Either way, I'm glad that you're here. And I want to say thank you to everybody who was joining Thomas and I and Linda, Deplorable McAllister, in the last 2 hours over on True Reporting. You guys, tonight, we've got two very special returning guests, my friends Nick Noe and Sergeant William Kotel, the actual whistleblowers in the case of the Benghazi attack back in 2012. You guys remember what happened that tragic day, and it could have been averted. That is the truth. That is what they tried to blow the whistle on, and not a single person in the chain of command wanted to do a gosh darn thing about it. So, unfortunately, they allowed good men and many people to be completely harassed, and even worse, because they were forced out of that embassy. Good people died, you guys. Very, very tragic. Please do join me once again also in welcoming to the program with me tonight my co-host for the evening, my good friend and fellow researcher, Thomas. And we're going to go to us right now, you guys. And where is... All right, there we are. Thomas and I are back, you guys. Thank you so much. There you go. Glad to have you guys here. We've got 962 of our closest friends here right now. We are in the midst of getting our guests on the line. Nicholas Noe and Sergeant William Kotel. Looks like we just now got everybody here in the room. So we are going to bring in my guests without further ado. Please, you guys, do join me in welcoming Nick and Sergeant Kotel. Nick, are you there, sir?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me. Sergeant Kotel, are you there, sir?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Do appreciate it, guys. Once again, thank you, everyone, to the everyone in the audience that's here right now. This is a very important subject. These gentlemen have joined me before, but they're joining us again because there is honestly a little bit of movement in this case. It's very important, just because this happened, so long ago. What difference does it make? Well, I'm going to tell you what difference does it make.
We have new evidence.
It sounds like we might have some video that we're going to be checking out. Nick, if you do have something you want to share, bud, we can go ahead and do the screen share, and you can share that with the audience. But I needed to say thank you to a couple of the audience members for already donating. Let me just do a quick refresh on the screen here, because Unfortunately, we're not getting the notifications over on the chat side. Herkimer Fodwaddle says, my meme site is up and running, includes my 2020 predictions, new memes daily, minds.com/Kaiser Rose. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Also need to say thank you to Michael Kenny. Thank you, buddy. I do appreciate it. And Ryan McAdams says the $2 train starts with where we go one, we go all. Thank you.
The $2 trains?
I mean, my viewers are doing it. I mean, I've never asked for a $2 train, but I mean, if you guys want to do a $2 train, I'm not going to stop you.
Yeah, we do that on mine.
Okay.
I thought of that, so they might be saying that.
All right,
train.
sweet.
So get the $2 truck train going.
I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Michael Kenny says, Wanda Diaz, nobody is invisible. I'm assuming that's to somebody in the audience. So Michael Kenny, sigh, 5x5. Oh, that's what he was trying to do. All right, and then Ditka Bear says, keep up the awesome work, bro. And
Bears.
Herkimer Fudwaddle, thank you. All right, guys. So we've gotten a few more people in the audience, and that was really my goal. We got just over 1,200. So Nick and Sergeant Kotel, for the people who are not familiar with your story, might not even be familiar with Benghazi. I mean, I find it hard to believe, but I don't want to assume anything from anybody. So please tell us who you are and how you got here today.
Nick, you want to go first?
Sure. Real quickly, an overview. I worked in the 603rd AOC, which is Air and Space Operations Center. It had EUCOM and AFRICOM combined.
Hey.
And I worked there at the time whenever the attacks happened in Libya. And afterward, I went to Congress and the FBI, and I was ignored and brushed off. And then after that, I decided, the first opportunity I would do something. I saw Charles Woods. He was on an interview with Dave Janda, and he said he'd been lied to the whole time, and I had to contact Dave, got a hold of Dave, and I got to talk to Charles and told him what really happened, at least from what I knew. And then from there, that's how everything's kind of blossomed into what it is now for me.
And Sergeant Kotel, how about yourself?
First off, I want to thank you and your viewers. This topic goes to the heart of a lot of other issues relating to this type of corruption and this type of cover-up. And I want to thank you guys for paying attention to the gentlemen that are hosting this event. And I encourage you to talk to your friends, family, and relatives about what you hear. Anyways, I'm a retired Army Sergeant First Class Kotel, and I was working at CENTCOM in the early warning and indications, or the watch floor, as we call it, during the night of the attacks. I was tasked with conducting intelligence gathering for both Central Command and African Command 5 months prior to the attacks, all the way to the day of the attacks. We were witnessing the attacks while we were in a large training exercise, which at that time the command structure felt as though we shouldn't terminate, and no help was given. But I also want to point out that at the same time the attacks happened in Benghazi and Libya, that our embassy in Egypt, in Cairo, Egypt, was overrun at the same time. And both instances, we were advised the State Department had it in hand. And later we found that not to be the case. And we also found that, as the United States military, we've never had a problem with responding in 2 hours or less to any incident whatsoever. And this one took 13 hours. And supposedly our troops weren't even there on the ground, that we had foreign forces helping. So,
Sergeant Kotel, can I ask you a question? When they would say something like, we've got this in hand, I mean, clearly that would indicate that they were going to send in support, or they were going to do something to actually address this impending attack or this ongoing attack. I mean, am I wrong in assuming that? Or, I mean, is that what you assumed as well?
No, you're right about that. But what the issue becomes is, when the Department of Defense is faced with a crisis situation on a tactical, strategic, or national level, we respond in kind, and we either send out rescue assets or support assets or forces, special ops, whatever we need to do to correct or fix that situation. That was clearly a Department of Defense area of responsibility. The Department of State claimed that they had it in hand, which meant that they were supposedly taking actions, which they were not. And we sat there and watched as this unfolded for hour after hour because we were in this training exercise. And no assets were allowed to go in that direction. And to take it a step farther, we do post-attack analysis, which we call reflections. And after the attacks were done, we obviously look at who was involved, who's talking about it, and gaining intelligence information off of that. And it was clear that there was no real response that was offered, even though there were assets right there. It was clear that this was a pre-planned attack that was already known about, warnings were given, and that the ambassador should never have been in country with the level of the warnings being so high and so credible. And later, after it was determined that this information would have to be turned over to a House Select Committee sometime later, information was provided. The House Select Committee decided and elected not to use the facts. And the facts are these. There was lots of human intelligence reports, lots of signals intelligence reports before the attacks. There was embassy communiques and cables of warnings, and they even identified some of the attackers. In addition, the manifest of the security detachment was lowered, and that was available. And during the attacks, there were so many assets that were in that area, to include NATO forces and friendly forces offering assistance, that were never exposed during the Benghazi committee. And I offered that information after, getting out of the military and retiring, to be honest with you. And they flat out refused it. So I don't know how the Trey Gowdy committee could go forward without these relevant facts. They basically touched on a lot of abstract stuff, hypotheticals, and outside information. And a lot of that testimony that everybody heard was only directed in that one small space. Like, for instance, Joe Blow was sitting behind a desk and was coordinating something, but no one knows what something was because the facts weren't there. I hope that makes sense a little bit.
It does. It does. So, as you said, there was clear indications in the days leading up to this attack, and then also, and then during the attack itself. Go ahead, Nick. During the attack itself, it was clear that this was a premeditated attack, and you said that you were able to get some of the names of some of the key players. Now we recently learned that the Iranian general who was just dispatched, shall we say, last month after the attack on some American contractors, that he was actually the one who had led this assault on the Benghazi, the embassy. Now, were you able to intercept any information about him at that time? Like, were you aware of that name prior to him becoming public here in the last couple of weeks?
Can I ask you where you got that information from?
It was reported online someplace. I thought that that's what they said, that this Iranian general was the same guy who... It was Gateway Pundit.
That's not true.
It's
I'm
not
sorry
true.
to say.
Okay.
No, the Iranians had nothing to do with the attack. I'm going to be blunt with this because there's a false narrative that goes out, and it fits into other people's agendas so that they can become bigger, better, whatever they want to be.
Okay.
But it doesn't go with the facts. I only deal with the facts of what took place, what I physically know, what I can testify under oath to.
Sure.
There was no Iranian involvement.
Okay.
The involvement that took place was from other groups. I can't name them, but I'm going to tell you that those other groups, they weren't part of Iran. And that story has come out on several levels. It's unsubstantiated, uncorroborated, and no factual basis to it. When Nick and myself talk to you, we're only going to tell you the facts of what we know.
Right.
It's starting from before the attacks, we gave credible information and intelligence out to both the embassy and to military forces in the region, to include NATO. And we also went through the attacks while we were in a training exercise, at least I was, and that there were assets available that were not utilized. And I can tell you, after the attacks, we knew who was there. And also, the military has never taken 13 plus hours to respond to any incident, especially with an ambassador. That's a high level individual. And the ambassador, under his checklist, should have been removed well before then. And security still should have gone up, even with the ambassador being removed. But instead, security went down. And later, when I dealt with the Benghazi committee, I dealt with both the Trey Gowdy side, the Republican side, and the Democrat side. Neither side wanted any of the information whatsoever. They wanted none of the facts. They didn't want to go back and gain that relevant information from the attacks, showing where forces were, showing who was talking on signals intercepts, showing what human intelligence was coming in on who was doing what. We didn't even take NATO and our allied nations information. So, this whole concept and notion of Iran being part of this is not there. That's not provable or substantiated, nor is it credible. And at the same time, we know that information to this day still exists and can be gotten by the president if he chooses to sign an executive order to recover that data. It's all there.
So this is particularly interesting to me because I found it reported on Daily Wire as well. So apparently, I mean, it's something that was widely reported across what I would consider to be conservative news outlets that I generally trust. Why do you think that is? Do you think that this was an effort to legitimize the dispatching of this general? By linking him to this additional attack, and then they could say, he's more responsible than perhaps he actually was. Or can you think of any reason?
Well, either way, he needed to go.
Well, obviously, but I guess I'm wondering why it was necessary for that to happen, in this particular way. I mean, are they looking to wrap up Benghazi, or do you think that the Trump administration is going to go back and take another look as a result of saying that this general was attached to it?
Well, let me break that down into two answers for you on two separate, basically, issues you brought up to me, okay?
Okay.
Hopefully I do it correctly so you understand it. On the first part of this, when people go to different media outlets and they have credentials that show that they have possibly placement and access or knowledge in that area, they can tell those media outlets what they choose to tell them. And the media outlets, unless they do a fact check or check the sources of the individual explaining to them that Iran was involved, etc., they're probably going to run with it. It does, lend credibility to the Soleimani hit, but I don't believe that has anything to do with the White House at all, or this administration at all.
Okay.
I don't believe that. He's the head of a terror organization worldwide. He's a HVT #1.
Several.
So he's a target of opportunity. So, for example, if he's in the country of Iran, yes, he's a general, and we can't go in there and pop him. But when he leaves the country of Iran and hangs out in Iraq, we know that he is conducting terrorism, and he is a definite authorized target, and legal, by the way, because he is on a international terrorist hit list.
Right.
So that's one answer for one of the questions you brought up about possibilities on why some of your conservative media outlets may be presenting that information.
Okay.
And I urge you and them to please check the source credibility, the facts. The facts don't support that narrative, so I don't know why they would have run it. The second part of this is kind of what you asked about. I guess it goes into what would be the purpose of doing it. So let's answer that a little bit. So the purpose of doing that, obviously, is to be top person on the totem pole. Top person on the totem pole, they get book contracts, stars events, and et cetera. They make profit off it in some way, shape, or form, whether that's financial or, power or, fame. It just depends on what type of profit they're looking to make. I submit to you and to your listeners that we, as individuals coming forward, myself, Nick, and others, Josh, General Vallely, Mr. Woods, and others that have come forward, we are only seeking to put out the direct information that we have facts on.
Right.
We will say what we know, and we can confirm or deny some things without breaching a classified realm. And I think that's a fair way to categorize it. And then further, we can also state to you that there's a lot of people that like to spin these stories to mold their own sort of narrative, again, for their own agenda and purpose. And I really caution people to be careful with that so that they understand whether it's true or false if Iran was involved with Benghazi. I can tell you categorically it's false. I mean, I know that. I know that after seeing the intelligence leading up for several months, because we were tasked to help AFRICOM, which was not a formally established command, we were tasked to do a lot of their intelligence gathering, and NATO's, that information never came up. But take it one step further, you can see currently on the Middle East steady state that since President Obama was in office, a huge shift in the Middle East has taken place where Shia sect groups, which are basically Iranian-backed, have dominated certain portions of the Middle East, and there's no balance with Sunnis, okay? And that has created a lot of tension and animosity in a great many ways, and you can take that for what it's worth. So Soleimani really had a lot of influence, especially in Iraq and in Syria, which was fueling, total conflict.
Right.
Obviously, you see that the Morsi Brotherhood that took over, supposedly in a legitimate election, which I don't believe, the Morsi Brotherhood took over, they are part of the Shia group. And General al-Sisi, who is a Sunni, did go back in and conduct a coup d'etat to retake Egypt. Because at that point, we were, threatened with the Suez Canal and many other, historical antiquities that were in Egypt. And so you can see this big trend in the Middle East taking place. And that's something that can be reversed, course corrected, if certain steps are taken. Those steps were recommended back in 2012 by myself and others when I was at CENTCOM. And they fell on deaf ears. And you just saw constant attacks, constant things happening. Am I allowed to go off topic a little bit?
You are. Right before you do, William, let me just give a couple of quick thank yous to the audience. Temp Newt 62, thank you for that. Anti-Millennial 1986, thank you for that. Terry Gillis Diriute, Canada 5x5, you nerdy hero of the Republic, thank you for that, Terry. Rhonda Johnson, thank you. New World Sun, new member of the channel, I appreciate that, thank you. BHack1216, thank you very much. Faithful Anon, I'm sorry, where did you go? Faithful Anon says, Patriots are now in control, sheep no more, where we go one, we go all. Thank you, Faithful. Geezerman says, love your shows, RP. Facts matter, truth matters, definitely. And I'm so glad that we were able to set that straight on that story about the Iranian general. That's something that I've been really wondering about, and I was hoping you guys were going to have the answer for me. And then True Reporting, my co-host Thomas. I really appreciate everyone chilling tonight. This was a lot of work. It was, you guys. You would have no idea. Red Pill 78 is worn out, and we still got both streams off the ground. We will never back down or give up. Tonight is truly amazing. Absolutely. And I just want to say, you guys, Thomas is such an amazing friend. I want to thank him for asking me to come here and hang out with him this weekend. He has become one of my best friends in my entire life, whether it's just online or in real life. And so I could not be happier to be here and more grateful for the opportunity to come hang out and do these shows with him. And then Michael Kenny says, I'm wearing a flannel too. If it's a day in the USA, I'm wearing a flannel. And then Floricio says, thank you both, True Reporting and Red Pill 78, for all your hard work. It's not easy waking up the masses, since it's much easier to fool people than to tell them they have been fooled. Thank you, Flor. Do appreciate it. And then Chad Hendricks says, is it just me, or is John Mappin starting to freak you the F out? Feel free not to say this out loud if you don't want to. Guys, I think that here's my thing. Obviously, I don't give personal opinions about people on the show. I will say that I thought that John, was very nice when he was on the show. I don't pay any more attention to his Twitter than I do anybody else's, so I don't specifically know what you're talking about. I hope that John is okay, and I hope that everything's all right. There has been a lot of people saying a lot of different things recently, and it's one of those things that when people start talking trash, honestly, I've got so much more important stuff to do, like research and editing videos takes a full 8 to 10 hours a day. So I'll probably look into what you're talking about now that you've said that in a super chat, though. And then shoot me a wink if I'm right. Thanks for that,
I
Chad.
got to say, Red Pill 78, if you got negative comments from people, you must be doing something right. So well done.
Thanks. Thank you, Sergeant Kotel. I do appreciate that. Crystal Pistol also joined as a member, and Son of a Green Card. I love. How cool is that? It's like a transformer, a hippopotamus transformer. And then Michael Kenny says, anti-millennial 1986 is my girlfriend, and she's freaking gorgeous. Also deals with my antics. Let's give her a solid 17. 17 in the chat for anti-millennial 1986. Awesome. Michael and anti-millennial will have to do a double date if we ever run into each other. All right. Sergeant Kotel, thank you for indulging me, and my thanks for the audience. Please continue. You said you're about to go off topic.
Yes, I'm just going to ask you to please go back to 1 year, 2012, and if you look at the large pictures and the smaller pictures, which I'll put into a chronological perspective very quickly. In that year, it was an election year for Barack Obama to get reelected as president.
Yeah.
In that year, when Osama bin Laden was killed by the president and his staff, they killed him, okay? It was a good strike. But after that, we were not allowed at CENTCOM to report on Sunni-led attacks, which is al-Qaeda-based attacks, which is not giving the president and that staff a proper picture. So plausible deniability. And I've raised a lot of issues about that throughout that time and tenure in that year. And then when AFRICOM was created in about April to May of that year, I got tasked with my watch floor to conduct all their intelligence information, to push intelligence forward and pull it, to include to NATO in covering that region as well as our own region, okay? And CENTCOM by itself has 21 countries that we covered at that time. So that was kind of a big tasking. So we knew everything that was happening with Libya, okay?
Okay.
The lead up to the attacks before 9/11, we were getting a great deal of intelligence information that were threat-based. And they were specifically against the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. Consulate, et cetera. And what we were seeing was that the security there was being decreased and not increased. We also were seeing this, what's called a checklist. And when a threat becomes so significant, or multiple threats do, there's a checklist to remove key personnel. That's the ambassador and several of the key top staff that are there. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen. We also saw that during the time to the lead up on 9/11, it was scheduled for a huge training exercise for CENTCOM. 75% of the workforce at CENTCOM was at work that night. And we were not allowed to stop the training after the attacks began for more than 8.5 hours. And at the same time, as I call you back to, the embassy in Egypt, in Cairo, was overrun by Muslim Brotherhood, which was the Morsi group that was running Egypt under the lawful elections, according to them. So this has all taken place in this 1 year. And then after the attacks in 2012, we also saw that when we collected the data and we collected the reflections and we sent those forward, we were advised that you will send everything on Libya and everything on Benghazi forward for review by the congressional, the intelligence committee for the Congress. Mm-hmm. And so we started pushing everything forward. But none of this stuff that was happening with soldiers and with government employees that night, raising red flags, screaming and yelling about things, it fell on deaf ears. Nobody was doing anything. And then when the committee finally came to have its hearings, and when we started to push that information forward in 2014, because that's how long it took, then they didn't want the data. There are specific systems that we deal with. One of them is a global command and control system, or the GEEKS. It shows where all friendly, all neutral, and all allied forces are, and all enemy forces in the region, air, land, or sea. None of that data was presented. No human intelligence reports were presented. No signals intelligence reports were presented. None of the imagery from MASIT was presented. And I'll tell you, Nick Noe can speak directly to the fact that there were many UAVs in that area. Some armed, some not armed, but they had the capability in the first 30 minutes of the attack to neutralize mortar teams and other things that were hitting our guys. And there was no effective response that night. All the responses that the military had sent forward were turned back or told to stand down. And we're finding that out now later. And I mean, I'm just telling you what I have been briefed on, but I know that evening that several forces were turned around because we were briefed on that at CENTCOM. So this is a big nightmare year for this re-election. And a lot of things went wrong, and none of them ever should have gone wrong. And even if they did, they should not have taken that amount of time to ever respond anywhere. And that's what I have to say. Hopefully that was quick.
Well, Nick, did you want to comment on that? Get in on this?
Yeah, my job was to manage the assets, and I knew where everything was. That was my job. I had to make sure. And then all of our subordinate units contacted me every day and gave me their reports, or if they didn't have the reports in on time, I'd have to contact them and get it from them. We had rescue teams. We had people in the Mediterranean, Marines. We had, the drones. We had Army personnel that were not just in Libya and other countries nearby that they could have responded. We had assets, we had jets, we had fighter jets, we had everything and anything that you would ever need in the theater of war. We had everything available at their fingertips, and none of it was used. And not only that, there's something I found out recently. There's somebody that was that Charlie Daniels highlighted named John Myers. He's a Marine officer that was in charge at the time of where he was. I think it says here he's in Rota, Spain, and they were running an exercise at the same time too. And then and I also have come in contact with somebody who's on the flight line in Aviano, and they were running an exercise too at the time. It's really strange that 3 different commands were running an exercise at the same time on 9/11, one of the one of those heightened alert times each year at that point, and even now today I would say. I find that strange.
I think it's very strange too, but unfortunately it's become kind of the hallmark, the calling card of events like this. Too often we see drills held at the exact same time that terrible events like this take place. And it seems to happen in many, many different times. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been tracking this in the same way that, probably many members of the audience have. But is that something you guys have noticed? I mean, like, besides this event here back in 2012, have you had other instances where you were holding drills, an attack like this actually takes place, and then as a result, you are told to not intervene?
Yes and no. I'll give you an example. In 1993, some sheikh in New York City took a took a van full of bomb material and tried to blow up the World Trade Center. I was in an infantry unit. I was with Charlie Company, 1st 327 Infantry at 101st. We were down at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas in an exercise known as Joint Readiness Training Center. From the time that attack happened, the battalion commander ordered us to get into what's called PZ posture on open fields. We had helicopters standing by, we took our blank adapters off, and we had live rounds standing by. And I mean, this took, I think, less than an hour. And we were ready to fly anywhere, locked and loaded, live rounds, ready to go. So to have a training exercise in the event of, say, 9/11, which is a significant date, you can switch instantly almost from a training exercise to real-world activity. And that's a fact. I mean, and with CENTCOM having 75% of the folks there, it was simple to turn off the training exercise, to turn on the real world stuff, and get busy and do our jobs. It would have been very simple to do that. And we would have had a lot more manpower there to do so. So any training exercise could be changed from training to a live mission in a very short amount of time. And I'm not talking like days, I'm talking like minutes to half an hour even.
So I guess maybe a better question is, how often does the military run drills or tests of this nature? I mean, is this something that happens, on like an annual basis, monthly, weekly, or is it likely that something like this somewhere is happening, even as much as daily?
Sometimes we do daily stuff for testing or training. For CENTCOM, such a large command, we run a training exercise once a year. Like lower level units and tactical units will run a lot more exercises. Just to go to Iraq, units have to certify by going to a training exercise that's roughly 30 days long. But at any point in time, the training can be stopped. Everybody goes and refits to gain the right equipment, the right gear, and the right munitions, and they can be ready to go to real world combat in a heartbeat. And it's the same with CENTCOM.
So let's take as an example the tragic attack back in September 2001. that type of a drill that they were running, was that a once a year kind of drill, or was that something that would have, been more commonplace?
You're talking about 1993, right?
No. I mean, you
in 2001 that happened too.
Yeah, it
And,
happened in
I know what you're talking
2001
about.
as well. There were There was a large drill that was taking place in 2001. I guess I'm trying to get a feel for these major attacks. So we've got 1993, 2001, 2012, and all significant attacks in American history all had drills taking place on the same day. And sounds like 1993 was the only year where they were not told to stand down as a result of those drills. So in 2001 and 2012, both in September, significant drills, significant attacks, all both told to stand down both times. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, 2001, the drills turned instantly into real world.
Okay.
There was no lag time there. But in 2012, the training we were conducting was not transferred to real world.
All right. And now, when you had said that you were not allowed to give the intel about, I'm sorry, was it the Sunni or the Shia?
Sunni, which is Al-Qaeda-based.
Sunni,
groups,
okay.
basically.
Now, the reason that you were not allowed to, was that like a directive from like the top down, or was that a directive because Barack wanted to feel like AQ had been taken care of, or what was the reasoning for that?
Well, he reported that Al-Qaeda was decimated, and I was given, direction from my chain of command. I can't tell you what he did in the White House because
Sure.
I wasn't there.
Okay.
But I can tell you from my level and from the Iraq team's level, we weren't reporting most of the attacks. We were replacing a lot of the attacks of the Sunni who were doing the attacks in Iraq because they were being disenfranchised. Literally, Prime Minister Malik